Okay, so now it's, I hope it's recording. Okay, so firstly, African origin oils. I'll mention at this stage that we're looking at a rebrand for the business to just go to African origins. For some reason, time and time again, we introduce ourselves to people and they keep thinking we're African original oils. So they keep getting bounced emails and things. So after a few years of that, we've decided to just rebrand a little bit. So in the coming months, you'll get that communication. But for now, we are still African origin oils. And as you know, we've recently registered this trademark, Mokaté, which is the Tswana word. Tswana is the local language spoken in Botswana and in parts of South Africa where we're located. And it's the name for the Kalahari melon. It's one of two names that they have for the Kalahari melon local to the farm. And I mean, we've had a bit of a journey of it so far. I'll go into a bit of that in a second, but it's these two things that I've written on the bottom: unique chemistry and exceptional sustainability, which are the two things which, when I started digging into this ingredient almost 10 years ago, probably actually the first time I looked at it was about 10 years ago this year. The more I dug, the more I worked out that there was something interesting in the ingredient itself, the chemistry, and the sustainability of the plant. And 10 years ago, sustainability, it was important, but it wasn't as hot of a topic as it is these days. And it's just becoming more and more important. So I've repurposed this presentation a little bit to make it a bit shorter. The last time I did it, I sort of touched on an hour, and I think the idea is to run through it a little bit quicker this time and to leave more time for questions at the end. So I've repurposed it to go into the classic who, why, what, where format, and I'll just quickly introduce the core team working on this. There are the wider team is actually a bit bigger. So we have some staff here in the UK, but if we talk about in terms of the business development side of things, but if we talk about who is producing this stuff in South Africa, who is making sure that it's getting shipped, who's sending you the compliance documentation, things like that, it's this is the core team. So bottom right, we have Mike. Mike's been on the farm now probably 4 to 5 years. I think when we first made the website, we said he had been at the farm 2 years, which was true, but the website's also a couple of years old now. So Mike is Mike's fab. He's local to the region. He has a whole bunch of electrician and very, very practical qualifications, and he's a super guy to have around, especially for the oil press and our filter and stuff like that. So very technically minded, and he sort of acts as our foreman on the farm to help Oki, or Okut as his proper name, top right, who is my uncle. So the farm where we made this, shall we say, discovery, it's my uncle and my granddad are neighboring farmers. My granddad is by now very old, and he retired finally last year, the age of 83. He got rid of all his stuff for the quiet life. And but yeah, like we'll get into in a second, and I'm sure you've seen snippets of the story before, but it was my uncle and Oki who were really up against it about 10 years ago in the face of this changing climate. And I mean, Oki is a very experienced farmer, and he's a very, very good farmer, but he doesn't necessarily have the access to the market that I suppose I've brought, and I don't have the access to the crops that he has. So the two of us make the link between farm in the Kalahari and delivery to Connecticut. And then bottom left-hand corner, we have Aletta. Aletta is a new joiner to the team. So she joined us in January. She had 35 years experience at Sasol, the oil company in South Africa, who you may have heard of. They're also in the cosmetic space. Yeah, she had a history of actually importing and exporting organic peroxides, and more recently, for the last 20 years at Sasol, has been doing operations type roles. She's fabulous. She has a degree, I think, in chemistry and maths, and very, very practically minded, and is yeah, really helping and driving actually a lot of our operational development, which I'll speak about a little bit later on. But you may start, as we process more orders, you may start hearing from Aletta more and more, because she will be the one actually moving the oil from the farm to where it needs to go. She's based in Johannesburg. And then just a little bit about myself. So obviously I was born in South Africa, not so far, about an hour's drive from the farm that we're talking about. I lived there until I was 12, moved to the UK, did my secondary education and university education in the UK. I studied chemistry, graduated around the financial crisis time, and sort of thought it best to just stay in university for as long as possible. So I did a PhD in chemistry before joining the real world in about 2012, when I got a job in finance. But it was actually around that same time that my uncle first mentioned to me about this plant. He had made some inquiries because it was the only thing growing. And it was around then that I started Googling bits and pieces and really not knowing so much about the market. But that was sort of where the seed was planted. So that's probably a good time to move on. So the why. So why are we here, and why did I leave a career? I don't know if I could say promising career, but a career in finance to pursue this. I mean, if you look at these kinds of pictures and headlines, it's not you wouldn't think it's a good place to go. And I'm sure those of you in California, you've also had that maybe shared social anxiety about water and drought over the last few years. But it's very much a part of our upbringing in South Africa. And yeah, in around 2009, this drought started in South Africa, which, look at the dates on these headlines. It's from 2013. It was already sort of very serious, the worst in 80 years. And as you can see, it's just 2016, 2019, still really continuing. The irony of us having this conversation at the moment is that this year we've probably had the best rainfall year for about 30, 35 years. But it's really bizarre because it all came in about 3 months, where it just didn't stop raining. We had record rainfall, and it's just stopped since. So lots of farmers who were very excited by the rain and thought it would be a good year, then invested quite heavily. And there hasn't been rain now for 6 weeks, and there's nothing on the horizon. So I think, again, this year is going to be a very difficult year for many farmers there. So this whole region is definitely undergoing a big shift in weather, and that's making it very, very hard for people to operate there. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Kalahari melon seed oil, and it is this incredible crop that would grow when all of the maize looked like this, bottom left-hand corner, and the sunflowers, and scattered in amongst these plants were these Kalahari melons that just seem to stick around. But it makes sense. They've evolved in the Kalahari Desert now for thousands of years, and they're used to that kind of weather, and they sort of suck up this water, they store it as a reservoir, and they deploy it as they need to. So very, very well accustomed to this terrible weather. So when we're talking about the oil, or any oil, we're obviously only talking about a collection of fatty acids or triglycerides. And when it comes to Kalahari melon oil, or Mokaté oil, sorry, it's the devil is really in the detail. I mean, we can, in theory, go to a lab bench and we can get a collection of fatty acids, and we can pour them together and we can recreate, you know, any of these oils. So the key to understanding why Kalahari melon oil is unique is really understanding its fatty acid profile. And obviously we have, what we're quite excited by is the high concentration of linoleic acid, which stands at around 70%. The thing about that though, and which is something I learned the hard way, is in the first few years when I was trying to market this ingredient, I would go around all these trade fairs and tell people, oh, you know, it's very exciting, it's got 70% linoleic acid. And people would almost avoid me because that in itself is not very exciting, because linoleic acid is unstable. So you know, it's polyunsaturated, 2 double bonds. It's not the most stable fatty acid, and as a result, people don't like like working with it. So evening primrose oil, grapeseed oil, I mean, these things are relatively well known to go off quite quickly. But for some reason, I still have Kalahari melon oil on the shelf from 2016 or potentially even earlier. That's, I mean, hasn't gone rancid. It still smells sort of okay. And ours isn't unstable. And I mean, we didn't know this at the time, but with hindsight and with tests that we've done since, we've come to sort of realize why. And obviously, okay, the thing I suppose worth mentioning is that these two highlighted fatty acids, linoleic and linolenic, are the two fatty acids that cannot be produced by the human body, but are absolutely critical to cell structure and health. So if you're going to design an oil for the world and you say, okay, well, which should be our, you know, the primary oil we go to, I would say that probably something leading with these two fatty acids is going to be your first choice. It's catch-22, because then you know, for industry it's not so good, because it's not typically a stable oil, a stable fatty acid. So okay, it's not going down. Okay, so just by comparison, so a few oils we selected. This is obviously not exhaustive. It doesn't contain things like meadow foam and coconut, because those oils don't contain a lot of you know, linoleic acid. I have to sort of pick ones that we can at least compare within the fatty acids. So it just sort of shows you where it sort of comes in, comparable-ish to evening primrose, grapeseed, and prickly pear oil, and quite different, actually, chemically speaking, from things like argan oil, baobab, marula, sweet almond. Okay, and then this was a very important discovery. So we had heard that the vitamin E or the tocopherol content of the oil was very high, and it was only a few years into us trying to market this ingredient that we were able to do this test. I mean, for various reasons, I was still working full time in my job at the bank, and we weren't getting quite so much maybe done as we would have liked. But we managed to find a university in South Africa. They tested it for us, and I mean, they confirmed to us that it was very, very high. And then I went digging in the literature, and I found the comps. And prickly pear seed oil, for example, which was marketed as this very high vitamin E oil, or the highest of all the oils, we found was only a third of the vitamin E in our oil. So you know, that became interesting, and just gave me one more reason to leave my job and pursue this ingredient. Because I mean, tocopherol is tocopherol. We all we all know it, I guess. But it plays, we think, quite an important role in our oil. So just another. I forgot about this chart. You've probably also seen this chart before. So what we've done here is added together the linoleic and linolenic contents of various different oils and plotted them on a graph, just to sort of drive it home, to show that yes, okay, Mokaté oil is in the, it does have peers when it comes to essential fatty acids, obviously, but when it comes to vitamin E, it really, really stands alone. And this is not cherry-picked data by any means. I have not been able to find any oils in this range. I think this is an updated version of this graph, and I think I added borage and sea buckthorn and wheat germ after finding out that they had pretty high vitamin E contents, but still not, nothing in this range. And it really, I think it's quite a powerful chart because it just really puts into context how unique or how different Kalahari Melon is to lots of oils, because people can't, it's difficult to get people excited about an oil. And then we've played around with various Venn diagrams and classification systems, and this is probably the best we've come up with. Is how do you define, or what bucket do you put Kalahari Melon oil in? Because people will talk about a hair oil or a skin oil, or and in my opinion, there's not really such a thing as one is good for hair or one's good for skin. I mean, I'm very happy to have that conversation and actually to learn why one would be more hair and one more skin. But as far as I see it, we're working with cells, and cells contain fatty acids, and essential fatty acids are the important ones. So anyway, the way I've tried to classify it using these various different charts are, I guess anything left of this dotted line is polyunsaturated essential fatty acids, so anything with lots of linolenic or linoleic acid. And then we have our monounsaturated, so oleic acid or saturated fatty acids. And there's some overlap here on the right hand side, because these are also saturated fatty acids, but the ones here on the right hand side I've sort of put under the stable bucket. I mean, mainly because they're especially medophome and jojoba are a very long chain fatty acid, very heavy molecules, and it makes them very stable. But I guess this just, it makes the point that Mokaté oil sits within this category of polyunsaturated essential fatty acid oils and high vitamin E oils, but it's the one amongst them that is in addition stable. So it's probably, I often describe it as the only oil that leads with linoleic acid but is also stable, which is the thing that makes it unique. I think I've shared some stability data, Nina, with you. I'm not sure if you shared that with the team, but we have a partner in France, the innovation company, who did a rapid oxy test on Kalahari Melon oil. I forget the numbers exactly now, but I think it was something like a 6 hour 430 minutes or something like this, relative to much lower for all the other oils. So they're very, very keen on the oil because of its stability. And we're I keep saying this to John and Nina, but we are actually doing some efficacy studies. There's just lots of delays with the labs and things that we're working with. So, but it is coming. So I mean, these slides can actually also get updated because there's many more new products, but just to show you some of the applications so far. So lots of oils, face oils, beard oils, hair oils, lip balms from Lush, and this is definitely an American brand, but I think they've discontinued this range now. Kalahari Melon oil. Jack Black, of course, is an American brand as well. Full hair ranges. Liz Earle on the bottom here is a big Boots Walgreens owned brand here in the UK, and the top two are the two American brands, Hask and Not Your Mother's. And then various creams and face masks. And I guess I just include these slides just to show, because we used to get the question a lot, what is it used in, and how do you formulate with it? And I guess I just include it to show the wide range of ingredients. But Nina, I think, I don't know if you've shared with the team the database that we also made for these ingredients. Yes. Okay. So yeah, we made this, or we're keeping up a database of new ingredients, new products with Kalahari Melon oil, with Mokaté oil, that's coming onto the market. So if you ever need that link, please either just ask me on email. We have it available for you. Still on the what, so we've made a lot of, or we've put a lot of effort into making sure that our oil is sort of ready for the American and the European markets. So we've got NOP and EOS organic certification. We've got our next audit in June, and we've timed that to coincide or to come at least later than our the new facility that I'll say something about in a second will be online, and then our new production flowchart and processing unit will also be certified. This is quite an important thing to say and maybe just explain in person, is the Inky name. Very boring subject, but we did a bit of work on this a few years ago, but it's really, really important. So in the wider market, lots of people market Kalahari Melon oil as Citrullus lanatus seed oil. Now, in the literature and in the market, there's actually a lot of confusion. People use Citrullus lanatus and Citrullus vulgaris to explain both, or to refer to both Kalahari Melon oil and watermelon seed oil. And there's just confusion. So the PCPC acknowledged this confusion when they published their revised Inky List in, I think, 2007. And at that stage, they actually replaced Citrullus vulgaris with Citrullus lanatus. But they added a footnote, or a little explanatory note, to say that Citrullus vulgaris is considered a technical synonym of Citrullus lanatus. So the Europeans took that same guidance, and in COSing in Europe, you'll see an entry for Citrullus lanatus with Citrullus vulgaris as the synonym. Now, the reason we've gone for the synonym is because when the Chinese published their list, the IECIC, yes, they chose Citrullus vulgaris. And what we found was that lots of international brands, or lots of the bigger brands, insisted that the Inky list be on the China list. We tried to liaise with the Chinese. We didn't get so far. We spoke directly with the PCPC and got clarification on this. And we have a letter confirming from the PCPC confirming that Citrullus vulgaris is fine to use. So that makes Citrullus vulgaris the only worldwide compliant Inky name for Kalahari Melon Mokaté oil, and that's why we're using it. So if you're confused about that, if you need me to explain it again, or it took us a very long time to figure out, but by now I can explain it quite easily. We've done our safety testing, so we have a 50-person patch test that yielded absolutely no irritations, not even a mild one. So absolutely safe to use. That was tested in Germany as well. So in a sort of Western or European market. Cosmos registered, vegan registered. We will try next year for something like Fair for Life. Unfortunately, our certification body is they're not yet trained up to do Fair for Life, but it is something we've inquired about, and hopefully in the next certification cycle, we'll be able to do the same. Aletta, who I mentioned earlier, will also be helping us to prepare for ISO 9001 certification, hopefully still this year. All going well, which we think will sort of signal to yourselves and to your clients about our I suppose seriousness in producing really high quality oil. Okay, just to say something about sustainability. So I had mentioned earlier that the unique chemistry of Kalahari Melon oil was something that pulled me in. But it's really the sustainability of it that convinced me that this really was an ingredient for the future. So I just make a sort of very basic comparison here with tree oils. So I know that I've had this discussion with John before. I know you have argan oil in your books, and it's not necessarily targeted at argan oil. You know, the same is for marula and baobab, especially baobab, because baobab is, you know, these trees are hundreds of years old, and for us to think that we can supply the world from such a plant is, I don't know, just doesn't quite make sense to me. But the concept is all around elastic supply and elastic demand. So, you know, a sort of very basic economic principle of elasticity of supply and demand. And you just don't have that with trees. So if we take the argan oil market, there's a really nice chart on Google Trends to show the search terms for argan oil. If you go back to 2004, it really started to kick up in 2009 or so. So this is very basic. The numbers aren't accurate. It's just an illustration. But okay, so the sales or the size of the market in 2006 was much smaller than the existing sort of available resource, the argan forest, or the amount of marula trees available, or the amount of baobab trees available. But because that market grew so quickly, probably by 2010 or 2011, that supply and demand was matched, and there was as much being produced as there was being sold. But by 2014, there were already quite a lot of reports in the market that you know, half the argan oil being, or there was twice as much argan oil being sold as there was being produced. So, you know, and I think it's relatively widely accepted that there's quite a lot of adulteration that goes on in that market. And we know it's the same with marula oil. I mean, we know the people who are adulterating this stuff with grapeseed oil. Marula oil is very difficult to work with. It goes off very quickly, and it tests really. We know the people who do it, and we've heard their complaints, you know, time and time again. So that's the situation in 2014, is that speculators enter the market, and they see a buck to be made, and they buy grapeseed or olive or something, and they just sell it as argan oil. They sort of match that fatty acid profile, and they get away with it. But even then, if somebody in 2010 saw an opportunity and said, okay, well, I'm going to plant 1,000 or 2,000 or how many thousand trees, it's going to take 10 to 20 years for those trees to become mature, or 15 to 20 years for those trees to mature before you can harvest them. So that's when I'm talking about elastic supply and elastic demand, that's what I'm talking about. It takes too long for those trees to grow. So here the picture is, you know, the year 2029, there's a plantation, but the market just keeps on growing. So by the time you get to that plantation, you're playing catch up again. And with Mokaté oil, with the Kalahari melon, it grows every year, as much or as little as you want. We've had a policy now for a few years in-house. Well, I suppose it's more of a personal policy. It's more my strategy, that we want to produce something like 3 times more than our projected demand. The reason being is I've had by now a good experience of introducing ourselves to a distributor or a big cosmetics brand, and then you don't hear from them for a while, and then they ask you for some paperwork, and then you don't hear from them, and then all of a sudden they want 500 kilograms, and out of the blue, and they want it next week. So I'm very aware that if we land a big contract, and I know that there's one live opportunity with Centerchem at the moment, or that we've been discussing now for a while. If that happens, we will fill this white space quite quickly, and we will need that year's lead time could be 18-month lead time, depending on where the order falls in the cycle, to fill that demand. So we are constantly looking out for new sites. We're building our network quite effectively in Botswana and in South Africa and in Namibia, so that we will in the future have lots of satellite sites where we will produce the seed from, we manage our own seed bank. This plant is not commercially available to buy the seed, so we have to manage that ourselves. But we're streaks ahead of anybody else doing this. Still today, all of the other producers, and there are some doing this in the market, they're just interested in selling their whatever supply they have. I really think we're the only ones that have a bit of foresight here and are thinking about the future and not to disappoint our partners. And by now we have some really good partners, yourselves included. So that's why I really make this point about Kalahari melon oil. It doesn't compete with forests. It doesn't compete with food crops. It goes into the Kalahari where nothing else really is being grown. So it's a real opportunity to find a piece of the earth and find some utility for it. And by finding utility for it, we will bring quite a lot of development to those regions with ultimately a premium ingredient. There's another really nice little statistic that we've learned this year. So in our harvest in October, November, we made some measurements and we worked out that we were returning 96% of the biomass that we harvest directly to the land. So I think people's reactions to that is, oh, goodness, how wasteful. Whereas actually, no, it's goodness, how minimally invasive. That's a fabulous statistic that I'm sort of enjoying more and more when I speak to people, because you go somewhere, you harvest, I don't know, potatoes or beetroot or watermelon, and the whole aim of the game is to take away the biomass because it's that stuff that you're selling. Whereas for us, we're genuinely putting back 96% directly where we found it. So all of that carbon, all of that moisture is not leaving the area. It's staying there and is sort of rotting just as it would have done in nature. We're just taking away a very, very small part of it, and we're driving this market with that very small part. It's so unique. It's even with things like marula oil or baobab oil, you're taking away those kernels that are falling on the ground. Okay, you still have this massive tree that's there, but again, that massive tree is thirsty and it needs to survive for the whole year round before it produces its kernels. So those of you in California will I'm sure have heard of how thirsty almond trees are, for example. And it's the same in Africa with the trees we have there. So yeah, the deeper we dig in Kalahari melon oil, the more we just learn about its sustainability credentials and what it can offer for the market. So I should say a little bit about this land utility and the value add in going into these regions. So yeah, this was very sad. At the start of 2019, I read this report, the Agriculture Drought Report from Agri-SA, sort of an industry agriculture body in South Africa. Just an astonishing statistic that in 2018 alone, so remembering this drought had been going on since 2009, but in 2018 alone, 30,000 people had lost their jobs as a direct result of drought. And it really put it into context for me about what the impact potential is of this ingredient, because we are directly going into those areas and looking at developing a new market. We're not doing cocoa, we're not doing coffee, we're not doing tobacco. It's not as though there is an established market for something and we're saying, okay, guys, we're going to come in, we're going to do things a bit different. We're going to do some community development, or we're going to try and do things in a more equitable way. We're doing that, but we're on top of that, we're building an entirely new market in a region, specifically in a region that has been really devastated by drought. If you wanted to, you couldn't do coffee and cocoa bean, in these areas. There's no other utility for this kind of land. So, and then the other thing we've committed to is to try and do as much value add on the farm as possible. So hopefully in the future, and this will hopefully be something we will work with you on. We will try to make some product derivatives on the farm itself from the oil. So, some very basic mixing. There's some, in the last few years, there have been some interesting companies in South Africa doing waxes and soft spheres and things. Obviously they need raw materials. And the whole goal is to not just take away the agricultural material, to actually do some value add, so that we're not hiring people to pick up melons to throw into a wagon, but we're actually training forklift drivers, and we're training factory workers, and we're sort of upskilling and creating better paid jobs overall for the communities there. And in an effort to formalize that effort of ours, we were very kindly accepted onto the University of Cambridge Social Ventures Incubator this year, which was a great opportunity for us to work with some other social ventures to help us formalize our mission, and really zone in on that goal of ours, which is firstly to grow this market, which is commercially, but then to grow it in a way that is impactful, not just for the shareholders. Okay, so the how. This is a bit of a basic slide, and it probably doesn't give you quite everything you maybe want to know, but I'll say a little bit of the further upstream processes. So these melons lie in the field, and we have built some specialist machinery, repurposed pumpkin seed harvesters over the last 2 years, that firstly pushes the melons into a row with this sort of diagonal arm that goes in front of a tractor, and then a machine drives over these lines of melons, picks them up with spikes, crushes them up, extracts the seed using a sort of centrifugal tube, and just spits out this 96% biomass back onto the land just there, and we leave it there to dry in the sun. Once we have the seeds, we dry it in the sun and bag it up, and then we store our seed. So we don't press all the oil from a harvest. We actually store our seed and then press as we go on, just for your own sort of like a data point for you to work with. So recently in January, we pressed some oil from 2018 and sold that to a buyer in South Africa, pressed beautifully and made a beautiful batch of oil. We actually had that retested for the vitamin E, which is the great data that we got from that same batch. And the number did drop a little bit, but it's totally expected. It's quite well reported that vitamin E does degrade over time. But even then, it tested above 2,000 mg per kilogram, which is still more than 2 times more than prickly pear seed oil. So it's still way to the right hand side. So that was very, very encouraging for us to see that the vitamin E had stayed in the seed at such high levels for so long. So once we have the seed, we have this press. So this is a German-made press that we have on the farm. We've actually, since by acquiring this press, bought 3 more presses this quarter, which are being installed. One has already been installed. The next 2 will be installed in May. And that's all for our sort of recent investment drive to make sure that we're going to be set up to be producing the kinds of quantities that you need. We work with a Filtrox system to filter the oil, but not before, if we want to, treating it with this Clariant product. It's Tonsil by Clariant. So Nina, John, and I have had some extensive conversations about this. Nina, there are some samples on their way to you as we speak that were dropped off yesterday. Basically, this is just a sort of basic treatment for the oil. So this is a bentonite clay that we mix with the oil, and it's just there to suck up some of the, I don't want to call them impurities. They're not impurities, but it's the things that cause color in the oil. So after treating with this bentonite clay, we don't heat it. It's done at room temperature. It should be done above 25 degrees, but we just make sure that the room is above 25 degrees, which in the African sun it is. So we treat it with this clariant powder, 1 or 2%, and then we filter it out again through the Filtrox system, and it makes a really beautiful light oil. And so we will start to offer 4 grades of oil. So basically just virgin conventional, virgin organic. So that's the oil that's not been treated with the tonsil, but is either from conventional or organic stock. We do sometimes sell, or we are allowed to, shall I say, sell conventional oil from our organic stock. Obviously not the other way around. We can't sell you organic oil that hasn't been made from organic seed stock. But we are allowed to do the other way around if the demand is there, and we don't necessarily, and if we don't have the conventional stock, but obviously we're trying not to manage it that way. And the other one we will have would be, the other 2 grades we'll have is conventional light and organic light. So those would be the 2 grades of conventional and organic oil that have been treated with tonsil. So those maybe are for some of your bigger clients who want the protein removed, because that's one other thing that the tonsil does. It removes the protein from the oil. I'm sure you will have maybe had some queries about this over the last few years. People have become very, very sensitive about allergens, and they've raised the bar so much that they just don't want any proteins present in the oil. So that's actually why we first investigated this clariant or this tonsil treatment. But yeah, a nice side effect is that it makes a nice light oil, which makes nice white cosmetics. And then, yeah, these are our sort of packaging units. So we have a 210 litre drum, 25 litre drum, and 5 litre drum. So 180, 23, and 4.5 kilograms, respectively. I think that's everything on process and packaging. No, it's not everything. We're investing quite heavily at the moment in our production facilities. So before it's been quite manual. So the oil gets pressed and we fill up buckets and then we sort of filter each bucket. But as of end of May, we will have everything after the press will be under nitrogen. So it will first be pressed into a stainless steel sort of vat, 450 kilograms large, or 450 liters, shall I say. And once it's in there, it will pass through our filter for a first filter. And if it gets treated with clariant, with tonsil, it will go into a second 450 liter container, again under a nitrogen purge, with very gentle stirring, baffles in the container to not have a vortex. And if we need to treat it with the tonsil, we will treat it in that vat before then filtering it again, and putting it directly into these containers that you see once again under nitrogen. So that's going to really change our process. At the moment, our lead times, pretty much for any large order, is around 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how big the order is. We will be able to produce the same amount in under a week with this new system. So, give it 2 weeks, just for the sake of, managing expectations, but it's going to very dramatically change our process, and everything will be under nitrogen, which will be an added bonus. Okay, so that's where we are. So I don't know, those of you who travel to South Africa, it's not the kind of place where you'd end up. There's not really anything for you to see there. It's very, very flat geography, but it's about 4.5, 5 hours west of Johannesburg. You probably spend time down here in the winelands, or maybe up here and for safari, but it's probably quite unlikely that you'll end up here. And that's what it looks like. So, very, very flat, but thankfully lots of the thing that we want. So if you'll just allow me one very final, ideological indulgence. I saw this, I think it was an advert in the Financial Times many years ago, and I've never been able to find it since. So I've just recreated it. but I remembered it so well, and it spoke to me because, you know, the conventional wisdom is we want to stand out. So I want to be an individual and I want to be different. But actually, if you are outstanding, if the ingredient is outstanding, if the thing you're working on is outstanding, you will very much stand out. And that's really how I think of Kalahari melon oil. It's not just different; it's actually very the same as lots of other oils. But at the same time, it's really an outstanding ingredient, both in terms of its chemistry and its sustainability. So that sort of finishes me off. Where did I get to? 10 minutes left. Questions?
Bernard, I have a few questions. First off, I don't know. Let me just ask Nina, does Nicole still need to be let in? Is she still looking to get
Yes,
okay.
she is.
Bernard, since you're in control at the moment, if you could let Nicole back in.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. If you click under participants, I believe, she should be if you click under that, she should show up in a waiting room.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
No,
Nicole, are you back in?
She's connecting now.
Okay, great.
Perfect. So I have a excuse me, a few questions I just want to touch base on. Thank you, first off, very informative. It was very nice because it recapped a lot of the stuff that we were privy to, and then also touched on a lot of things that I certainly was not privy to. So I think it was a good learning experience. But unfortunately, I have several questions. I'll make them relatively brief. Since this grows in the conditions it does, would you consider it to be adaptogenic in the sense that is this capable? Obviously, it's named Kalahari melon seed oil, melon seed. Is it capable of growing in other climates? And if so, in this climate, has it become adaptogenic? And if so, is it only the vitamin E content, for instance?
Okay, so yes, it grows elsewhere in the world. So this melon, the Kalahari melon, is the evolutionary ancestor of melons. So the watermelon was derived from it, and in Australia they have something called the pig melon, which is similar, but they come from the Kalahari melon. If you go on YouTube, you will find a farmer in California who put a video up, and it's himself. He's cut the Kalahari melon open, and he calls it the Kalahari melon, and he asks the internet, can somebody tell him if there is a market for this product, because it seems to do quite well in drought. So yes, it does grow elsewhere. We are putting some, so that's good and that's bad. So it obviously creates opportunity to grow it elsewhere, which for some people might be good. For us, it might be quite bad if we start to get competition from elsewhere in the world. What we're trying to do, especially with the Mokaté name, is to create some provenance around this ingredient. Thankfully, it's called Kalahari melon oil, so we want to lean on that a little bit. But with this Mokaté standard, as we want to launch it as, we want to tie some provenance to the ingredient so that it should come from the Kalahari Basin plus maybe 200 kilometers, so to allow for a little bit of this change. For your question about the vitamin E, there is a producer, we've seen a few data points. So there's a producer in Namibia who's put his data online, and his data is only at around 900. Ours is 2,800. We actually harvested at another farm 2 years ago, and we had that analyzed. And the other farm was about a 4-hour drive from where our farm is, more into the Free State province, so more inland in South Africa. I mean, we're inland, but I mean more further away from the border. And also theirs was also at around 900. So it's not a lot of data, but we do have some indicative data to suggest that we have a slightly special species of the plant. I mean, there's a lot of genetic variation. We've seen there's a group in Pretoria that have published or have worked on a study that shows the difference just in the fatty acid profile. So I think just looking at the linoleic acid, there was a range between 44% and 77%. So okay, at least we know we're in the the upper end of that with our 70 or 71%. But yeah, there is a lot of variation in the sort of species, but we quite like the one that grows close to the farm.
So I'm just going to say that if you can potentially leverage that with any data that we can share, if you could put that into part of a presentation, I think that'd be great, because a lot of customers ask for adaptogenic ingredients, and furthermore, I believe positioning it in that it is at least different and unique, different and rare, if not unique, to other offerings would be fantastic for us. And then, and I apologize if anyone else wants to jump in. I just wrote down a few different things, so I don't mean to take the whole question and answer session. But have you ever looked at the biomass content in any of the? So once you've extracted the seed, is there any value of note in the biomass?
You have a supplier, I believe, DSM. Mm-hmm. DSM have a product called Peffer Protect.
Yes.
Yeah. If you can tell me how that's made, I would be very grateful. So as far as I know, Peffer Protect is made from, it's an extract from Kalahari Melon. So I don't know how it's done. I've not been able to find out. I don't know anybody at DSM. So I'd love to know that.
Bernard, I believe it is an extract, but now it's more lab made. So they're not using it from biomass, because they made it so that the conditions in the lab mimic the xerophytic conditions of the environment. So it's a completely lab scenario now. It's not necessarily taking a biomass situation.
Sounds like an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, Kelly, if you have some time to maybe take that offline a bit, I would love to. I don't know how much you know about it, but I would really love to learn about that, to see if it's something we can work with. Because okay, I do really love the 96% biomass stat, but maybe we don't need 96%. Maybe we could, maybe 80% is still really good, and we can use that extra biomass for something else. The innovation company in France are quite curious about the water and the sort of, I don't know if you know Alain from the innovation company, a curious character, but he's quite keen on alternative waters. He doesn't like the fact that the cosmetics industry uses distilled water to formulate with. So he tries to formulate with like birch saps and various sorts of natural waters. So he's definitely looking at that. So if he has any success, I'll obviously feed that back. But what we are looking at is the seed cake. So we're trying our best to try and split the seed into the shell and the kernel, and then we will probably get a hydraulic press to press the kernel, and then we'll get a very, very clean seed cake out, which will hopefully be for human consumption, because it won't have any shell in. And we happen to have had some interaction with a Dutch scientist who has made his life's work seed cakes, and his most preferred seed cake is the watermelon seed cake. So that's quite encouraging. But yeah, DSM seed cake, and I mean, people have asked about biofuel and stuff like that, because obviously there's a lot of definitely you can make ethanol from it, but we don't have a purpose for that yet.
Another question is with the tonsil, since you're referring to it, and I'm aware of why we refer to it as light, because we had discussed it a little bit via email with the coloration and such, but just out of curiosity, does that affect the viscosity whatsoever, since you're taking out the proteins?
Actually, it's a really, really good question. We've actually recently started testing viscosity for this new production facility to make sure that our tubing and stuff like that is right. Answer is I'm not sure, so I will check for you, but I suppose the intermediate answer is that we have actually started looking at viscosity specifically recently, so it shouldn't be so difficult to add on.
And I think the last question that I have, you're welcome, is With the nitrogen capabilities that you have, this is kind of two questions in one. One is that aiding in the stability? Obviously, I would assume that it is. But number two is, I know we have discussed a little bit about your hesitation on the vitamin E content, and because we don't know how it degrades over time and things like that. Where do we stand on that? Because the vitamin E, I believe, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I believe we all believe that that is a big selling point. So if you can tell me, especially if we could quantify it and say, indeed, there will be degradation, but this is kind of where you stand. Where do we stand on it, and does the nitrogen help that?
Yeah, actually, really good and timely question. Part of this, wait, let me answer the first question. So, yeah, the nitrogen blanketing, I suppose, wasn't necessarily to specifically for the vitamin E, more like peroxide value. There's a really nice paper somewhere online that shows the relationship between vitamin E and oil and peroxide value, and they're basically they mirror each other. So for us, it was just to like over time, I mean. So for us, it was to guard against potential oxidation in our own process and also during transport. So we've sent oil before to Brazil, and it's on the ship for like 3 months because it goes via Singapore. There's no direct, you can't do break bulk between South Africa and Brazil the good way, so it goes around the bad way. And we're just very aware that we're a long way away, and we want to make sure that the oil you receive is the oil we produce, and that there's nothing happening to it meanwhile. So I wouldn't say that the nitrogen is specifically for the vitamin E, but it's sort of for just the oxidation in general of the oil. And then on the vitamin E claim, yeah. So I suppose when we first had that conversation with Centerchem about how loud we want to be with the claim, we hadn't done the follow-up test with the old seed to sort of see how the degradation went. And so that's already encouraging because it shows that we've gone from 2.8 or 2,800 down to 2,000. So we can see that in 2.5 years, that's how long, 2.25 years, let's say, that's been the degradation. So it's not just a sort of transient property. It does stick around. So that strengthens our case a little bit. The other part of the Mokaté standard that we want to create is a sort of scientific standard. So we want to have a fatty acid, like a sort of a model fatty acid profile. We obviously already have that. We've done a lot of that. But to get that fingerprint quite accurate, we also need to start looking at sterols and well, vitamin E. So the vitamin E will be the one that will really set it apart. And just unfortunately, we've not really been able to do that with the labs in South Africa. So the lab that first did our vitamin E content, we were obviously very excited by it. So we tried to follow up and test every batch. But then the machine was broken, and then it worked again, and then it was broken again. So we've not had much continuity there, unfortunately. The lab our favorite lab that we've always used since we started to do fatty acid analysis, as of March, they are now offering both sterol content and vitamin E as well. So as standard, we will, going forward, test every batch for all of that. So the batch that we're producing for you right now, we hope to be ready sort of 20th of May, or we will probably test around the 10th of May. We'll have a sort of extended test, and it will be our first data point towards building the Mokaté fingerprint standard.
Bernard, can you just go into a little bit of what the efficacy studies that you're doing are for the team?
Sure. So we're working with the University of Pretoria in South Africa. They are doing a series of in vitro studies. Definitely they're doing tyrosinase. It's one we did a bit of literature digging on, and we found that there is some sort of a mechanism for linoleic acid inhibiting tyrosinase. So, I mean, we're not under any illusion. We know that our oil is primarily a triglyceride, but we also know that there is some portion of free fatty acids around, and we also know that when it comes into contact with the skin, there's further breakdown. So there's going to be, I don't know, we put it between sort of 1% and 6% free fatty acids in the skin is our best guess. And according to Alain Santon, the innovation company, that's enough to cause 25% boost in microcirculation, reduce fine lines. So the in vitro studies will just inform our further participant studies. And there we're going to be looking, yes, at fine lines, at hydration, and definitely at microcirculation.
Bernard, I have a question, kind of a no fun question. Everybody else's questions seem like more fun than mine. Is there any, you stressed the stability of the oil. Is there any chance or any plans to increase the shelf life from 24 to 36 months?
Yes, actually, yeah. Yes, we will continue to do stability tests on these batches as well. And I think once we have, call it 3 or 4, not many batches that have consistent stability data, we'll look to increase that.
All right. The reason I'm asking is the cost of air freight in this material is nuts. And so it would be much more advantageous to be able to start sea freighting the material. And then from an inventory management standpoint, if you're going to now offer 4 oils, then we have to, having inventory of all 4, obviously it would be better if they had a longer shelf life.
Yeah, understood.
Hi, Bernard. I just had 2 questions. Have you ever looked at the kernels for possible exfoliation properties?
We will look at the kernels for that once we figured out how to split them. So it's quite easy to split the kernel from the, sorry, not the kernel, the shell from the kernel manually, but we need to do it automatically. So we are actually working with some engineers to do that. And the minute we do that, we will take all of those shells, we'll crush them up, and that will be really quick because we've already made those preliminary inquiries, and we've looked at, for example, pecan nuts. There's a big pecan nut plantation it's about a 3-hour drive from our farm, but they've looked at exfoliation properties of pecan shells. Very bad, makes under a microscope it looks like shards of glass, so it doesn't make that nice round shape. So we know who to speak to, and we will do that as soon as we can. Okay. And the last question I had was, how much of a yield do you get? Like, how many kernels or seeds you need to use to yield 1 kilo of oil? So from a melon, we get 3 to 4% seed, and from the seed we get 15 to 20% oil. We can probably get higher oil, but that would mean sort of pressing a bit more aggressively, and we're not sort of wary to do that just yet. So it works out at about 0.5% yield on the melon. Thanks.
So I have one more thought. Putting my little marketing hat on, thinking of the farm that you mentioned so often, people love to know where their ingredients are coming from, and there's no truer story here than literally getting it from this farm in South Africa. Do you have a video that is put together that shows the farm, the guys working, your uncle sort of pulling it all together, that is shared on social media, or that we could share, or is anything like that available or thinking of doing?
I mean, we do have that one video. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You've seen that one, yeah. We've actually...
Great video, by the way.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, we were very, very pleased with it. It really changed the way we were able to communicate to the market. So we did actually just commission a new video for the retail brand that we have, this new Safiri brand, which will be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks. But is there a specific, given that video is available, is there something that video lacks, or is there something else you need or that you think would be nice to tell?
Let me take a look back at it and then get back to you and see if there's something else.
Okay. We will almost certainly do more in the sort of coming, I don't know, year or two. If there's something specific that you think would be nice to show, we do have all of the raw footage from that shoot, and we can maybe look to edit something and put it together. But yeah, it'd be great to if you have some sort of specific feedback on that.
I think really leveraging that, like the Champagne region of the Kalahari that you're trying to do, creating like a very specific, specificity into the melon comes from this region. So therefore, if it comes from outside of this region, it can't be a Kalahari melon. So once you get to that stage, creating the region around Kalahari melon, I think that would be kind of a great starting point for your marketing.
Yeah, it might be a little bit early to mention this, but I get excited by all these things that we've got going on, so I will. We are working with a German company. It's sort of like a satellite agricultural company. They use satellite technology to help various agricultural businesses, and they have offered to help us map our region. So there is data available, sort of publicly available data online that is sort of the academically accepted region of the Kalahari Basin. And they have said that they will help us to take that data, upload it onto their platform, and then we will add the 100 or the, not that we need to do that for our farm. Our farm is like right on the edge of this basin. But when we want to attract more growers and more areas, and I mean this, the region is shifting. So to say that it's this basin is not quite correct. So we will then do some work to draw that perimeter around the basin, and then it will be somewhere online where people can go and they can see, okay, this is the region. Kalahari Mokaté comes from this region. Here are our growing outposts. So it's a bit early to mention that because it'll probably take another, 6 months to get that thing online, and then it will be the growers that we will start to work with, or the other sites that we will start to work with, we will upload to that site. But that will be a very, very tangible, real thing that you'll be able to look at.
Anyone else before we let Bernard go?
Nina, actually, I just wanted to make a comment. Going back to what you were saying about how to make a connection with this product, I feel like our industry, it's much more nowadays than an efficacious product. They want to make like that emotional connection. Like, how can we make that emotional connection with this product? And i.e. that usually comes from the story. I've always said, and maybe I say too much, but I feel it's true, as much as people want to look good on the outside, they want to feel good on the inside. Hence why companies like Tom Shoes buy a pair of shoes, they give another pair to a less fortunate. It's how can you help us make a more emotional connection, i.e. a story that our customers, like, they're investing in your product, but they're really investing in the story as well. Like, they want to tell your story through the product that they are using.
Yeah, I think we found that quite challenging. So to convey, because we're fully convinced by the impact that we're making, and we're geared up for it, and we're set up for it, and we're fully walking that in that direction. I found it a personal challenge to communicate that well to people that I've been speaking to. And maybe this is a case in point, because to me, it feels very obvious. But I think understanding the context in which we're operating is really key. Something like Tom Shoes, or some sort of a commitment to donate 10% of profits or something to charity. That's sort of it's a very simple sell. It's a very straightforward one-liner that people can give to customers. I mean, we're at the end of the presentation. I've not even mentioned this, but we do actually have an agreement with the San Council of South Africa, which is the indigenous tribe local to the Kalahari, the San tribe. The sort of evolutionary fathers of humanity, fathers and mothers. And we do have that. We do that. I think we share 1.25% of our top line revenue with them. So that's a sort of comparable metric with Tom's or with some of these other companies that I think there's an American salad dressing company that's really good at this. I think they give like 50% of their profits away. But in our case, it is a bit more. It's a little bit more complex, and therefore it's a bit more difficult to communicate. But we see ourselves very much as a climate change intervention. Like we exist as a result of what has happened to the climate, and we have reacted to what has happened in order to mitigate the effects of that climate. And I think the challenge is trying to explain that to a buyer or trying to explain that to a customer. I mean, maybe it sounds a little bit arrogant, but it feels like there's sustainability and then there's sustainability. There's everybody else and then there's us. And everybody else is working on, let's say, for example, cocoa or tobacco or something, and they're doing it in a cooperative way, or they're doing it. There's this, I think it's an American chocolate brand, and their USP is that they do slave-free chocolate, and that's of course that's a really, really wonderful thing. But I feel like we're going even one step beyond that. We're pioneering into an entirely new market that. If it's not for this market, it would just sort of be, areas at risk of desertification, entire communities at risk of, ultimately becoming climate refugees and having to leave where they are. I mean, there's a township right next to our farm. When I was a child, there was a petrol station and a convenience store and maybe 3 or 4 shacks, and today there are 5 schools and 16,000 residents. And what's going to happen to these people if agriculture continues to decline in that way? So it's I'd say it's quite an in-depth conversation, unfortunately, but I think it's a very, very it's a far deeper conversation. You can have the conversation at a far deeper level, and I'm always willing to assist with that if it helps.
Maybe that's a good concept for a video.
Yes.
I have a fast harvest question.
Yep.
Do the melons grow and you harvest them all in one shot at a certain time, or do they continuously grow throughout the year?
It's actually a really good question. No, they don't continuously grow throughout the year, but the should we say the normal distribution of when they get ripe is quite wide. So it's sort of it's one of those other great things where there's half of it's good and half of it's a bit more challenging. So we have to pick our moment a little bit. But it does also mean that if there are different sites around the country, they will sort of peak at different times, which will allow us to harvest different areas. But it's all around. And the other really nice thing about it is in different parts of the country, that peak is very much different. So in the Cape, it's probably more June to October, whereas where we are, it's probably more August to December.
Thank you.
Excellent. Anybody else? I think you got quite a bit covered.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, felt like it. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you so much for your time, Nina, for setting it up. Guys, I'm really excited to be working with you. I think we made this sort of decision a few years ago after dealing with some traders that we didn't want to just trade out oil. It was something a bit more special than that, and that we really wanted partners, like real people who add value and can really understand the ingredient and can tell our stories. So we feel in very good hands, more bolstered by having had this meeting. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Well, Bernard, I would just like to say to that point that not to have too much of a kumbaya moment, but we kind of love dealing with smaller companies that kind of have a less corporate feel and can get things done, because that's kind of the way we operate. is a lot more, let's just get it done and let's not get bogged down in processes, but rather in actually getting things done. And so far it's felt very much that way. So I know from my interactions, John interactions, Nina's interactions in terms of requesting things, getting stuff out of you, as well as some of the others, Christine and Renee. We appreciate the support quite a bit, and I think we're off to a very auspicious start.
Great. No, I'm really glad, and here for any questions, or if you want to jump on a Zoom or a call, I'm always available. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard.
Bernard, can you please share the recording once it downloads and all that, because we have a couple of people we need to send it to who couldn't make the call.
Absolutely. Now I'm just trying to work out how I do this. Whoops. How do I do this?
Down on the bottom, if you hit, there's a share screen button.
Yeah, I've seen it this whole talk, but there it is. Stop share. There we go. And then it just disappeared. I think because I moved the names in front, or the videos in front of it. Okay, great. Everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch.
Sounds great. Thank you, Bernard.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye all.